Welcome to Aurora Water Conservation's class on irrigation efficiency. The goal of this class is to teach you the principles and techniques of irrigating efficiently, including selecting the right components, understanding weather conditions that affect your landscape, and finally, how to program your controller to be efficient. We'll also talk about smart irrigation controllers that use weather data to help you manage your irrigation. This is sort of a 200 level class that starts with the assumption that you have a good basic understanding of how irrigation systems work and are put together. If you'd rather start at the 100 level before jumping into an efficiency class, you can take our sprinkler system tune-up class online. It will give you a good understanding of the basics. But before we get into the irrigation fun, I want to share some facts about Aurora's water system. It is important to know where our water comes from before we use it. First, I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Tim York, and I've been with the Aurora Waters Conservation Team for 8 years. My background is in landscape architecture, irrigation design, and construction management. I'm a professional landscape architect and a certified landscape irrigation auditor through the Irrigation Association, and really just an irrigation nerd. To me, irrigation efficiency is one of the largest components of water conservation. If for some reason this class doesn't answer your irrigation question, just give me a call and I'd be happy to help. So let's start with a few questions. Do you know where we get our water from, where we store our water, how much water our city uses per year, what programs we offer, or how much water we have saved over the years? Where we get our water. Colorado is a headwater state with the majority of the state's rivers beginning high in the Rocky Mountains as snowmelt. One of the benefits of living in a state that relies primarily on surface water is that unlike groundwater, surface water is a renewable water resource. Aurora relies on surface water for about 95% of its supply. Aurora receives 25% of its water supply from the Colorado, 25% from the Arkansas, and 50% from the South Platte River Basin. One of the drawbacks is that precipitation levels vary greatly from year to year, making the majority of our water supply relatively unpredictable and highly prone to drought. Aurora's water system starts nearly 180 miles away and includes the use of reservoirs, natural river systems, pipes, tunnels, and pumps, all of which help us pull the water we own from our 3 river basins and deliver it to Aurora. The water is stored in 12 lakes and reservoirs. Aurora has a total storage capacity of about 156,000 acre feet of water, or enough water for about 3 years of use. The average distribution for the past 3 years is 16.6 billion gallons per year. About half that water is used outdoors. Aurora has a semi-arid climate, and our snow and rain levels are about half of the average annual precipitation for the United States. So it's important that we all do our part to help conserve water. We'll talk more about the effect of precipitation on our landscape later. Although our programs have been scaled back this year due to COVID-19, we still offer a variety of classes, a bunch of rebates, and can assist with any of your water efficiency questions. We'll talk about rebates specific to irrigation efficiency at the end of the presentation. You can also visit the Aurora WaterWise Garden for some amazing examples of WaterWise landscape. Our water conservation team loves data, and every year we analyze our programs for performance. The truth is, water saved through conservation and efficiency is the cheapest water out there. Over the past few years, our programs and your dedication to conservation have saved almost 500 million gallons of water. All right, so here we go. What does watering efficiently mean? Watering efficiently is using just the amount of water that the landscape needs to be healthy. Although it fluctuates yearly, about 45 to 50% of Aurora's water is used to water our landscapes. No matter how good, expensive, or high-tech a system is, if you don't monitor and manage your irrigation system, you won't be successful. Hydrozones are a group of plants or areas within a landscape that share similar needs, especially water. While turf and shrubs have obvious differences, it is also important to know the difference between shrub types, perennials, trees, and annuals. Try to separate moderate use plants from native plants as they have different water needs. If you water them the same amount, you'll be either overwatering some or underwatering some, but either way, something won't be happy. Evapotranspiration and precipitation are what drive efficient irrigation. Evapotranspiration, commonly referred to as ET, is a combination of the evaporation of water from the landscape soil and the transpiration of water through plant leaves or grass blades. ET, measured in inches, is what needs to be replaced with precipitation and supplemental irrigation. If we think about this in human terms, burning calories is equal to evapotranspiration. We want to eat just what we burn, and for efficient irrigation, we need to replace just what was lost through ET and not already replaced by rainfall. If over a week we have 1.5 inches of evapotranspiration and a half inch of rain, we need to provide 1 inch of supplemental irrigation to balance everything out. 1 inch of water over 1 square foot equals 0.623 gallons. In Aurora, our Kentucky bluegrass needs about 26 to 28 inches of supplemental irrigation per year. If we multiply 28 by 0.623, it tells us that we need about 17.5 gallons per square foot per year. A 1,000 square foot turf area will need about 17,500 gallons. This is good to know, but weather is different every year and is not consistent throughout the year. Water-wise landscapes and the use of native plants help us build landscapes that need substantially less water. Water-wise landscapes can thrive on 10 inches or less of water, and some native landscapes require no irrigation after they are established. While the annual average needs are important to understand, weather can change quickly and is variable throughout the growing season. Knowing the evapotranspiration daily or weekly helps us replace water as needed. This chart shows the variability year to year of turf water needs. It is also important to note that these values are for high performance or high demand turf, such as sports fields and other high traffic areas. Turf at your home can still perform well on about 80% of these values. To replace the water lost by evapotranspiration and not replaced by precipitation, we utilize different output types. Irrigation heads, also called sprinklers, are traditionally used for turf grasses. But there are large differences between them, and we must understand these differences when selecting what to install and when managing our controller. In general, spray heads are good in distances up 15 feet or less, rotary nozzles from 12 to 30 feet, and rotors for large spaces, 17 feet and up. Pop-up heads, whether using traditional spray nozzles or rotary nozzles, need to be equipped with built-in check valves. For spray nozzles, pressure-regulated stems are required. These PRS features make sure the water droplet size is appropriate, also a key component in efficient irrigation. Drip irrigation, while mainly used for shrub beds, can also be installed under turf. This requires inline tubing with built-in emitters and a good knowledge of proper install methods. If you're interested in using subsurface drip irrigation for turf, I recommend educating yourself on methods or hiring an experienced contractor. When it comes to programming your controller, it is the precipitation rate of each head type that is very important. Like a rainstorm, the precipitation rate of a sprinkler head is how fast the water is being applied to the landscape. We measure this in inches per hour, not gallons per minute. Gallons, while important, doesn't reference the area water is being applied to. Also, since ET is expressed in inches and we're replacing water loss to ET, we need to stay consistent. Sprinkler head types vary in precipitation rates when compared to each other, but they also have ranges of precipitation rates on things like nozzle selection, head spacing, and pressure. Let's quickly examine each type. Pop-up sprinklers with spray nozzles have the highest precipitation rates, typically between 1.5 and 2 inches per hour. Think about getting 2 inches of rain in an hour. That's a pretty good storm. Since spray nozzles put out water the fastest, they need to run the least amount of time. We also need to be careful about runoff since water is being applied much faster than the soil can absorb it. Rotary nozzles on pop-up bodies are usually the slowest with a range of 0.4 to 0.8 inches per hour. With rotary nozzles, it is very important to stick within a brand. For example, the Hunter MP rotator puts out water at about 0.4 inches per hour, while the Rainbird rotary nozzles are about 0.6 inches per hour. Rotor heads can be tricky. We tend to use 0.8 inches an hour for general information, but it can vary widely. Changing the nozzle in a rotor can double or triple the water output, so having a good understanding of nozzle selections and spacing is very important if you want to use rotors. We won't cover the specifics in this presentation, but if you currently have rotors and questions, feel free to give us a call to discuss your specific situation. Drip irrigation also varies widely. Inline drip tubing has specific precipitation rates that can be found on the manufacturer's website based on the model you selected and the row spacing. The cool thing with inline tubing is you can play with the spacing and flow rate to change the precipitation rate for a given area. Traditional drip irrigation, which we call point source, where you have individual emitters, is very hard to determine precipitation rates for. If you have 0.5 gallon per hour emitters and I have 2 gallon per hour emitters, we have very different watering time needs. The best practice here is to match the emitters for the plant type and visually inspect the soil for wetness between waterings. This will allow you to get a great feel for your landscape. While we know ranges of precipitation rates for different irrigation types, we need to do some testing to understand what each zone is really doing. The first method is a process called the gross precipitation rate formula. To use this formula, we need to know the area covered by that zone in square feet and the flow rate of the zone. This is where the method gets tricky. Residents aren't allowed to open their meter pit to get a flow reading. A flow meter could be installed on the irrigation system mainline to use this method, but you'd probably be better off going with option 2. A catch can test gives us the most accurate information on performance of our system. Zone by zone, we can determine the precipitation rate and how evenly water is being applied to the landscape. This is called distribution uniformity. There are plenty of how-to videos on performing catch can tests you can find using Google, so we'll just touch on the basic idea. You can use any vessel, actual catch cans, tuna, or soup cans. If using something other than actual catch cans, you want something with straight sides and a flat bottom, like a soup can, so you can measure the depth in inches. Catch cans or something like a Tupperware dish or bowl requires you to measure the volume in milliliters, know the area of the opening, etc. If you choose to do this on your own, either order some catch cans, also called catch cups, online, or opt for tuna or soup cans. Place them in your yard and run the zone, or multiple zones if they overlap, for a specified amount of time. Then measuring the depth or volume of water, you can determine your precipitation rates. The uniformity is determined by how evenly the water is distributed across all catch devices. Before performing a catch can test, make sure the system is in good shape. Aside from the helpful videos online, you can find this catch can test worksheet on our website, auroragov.org. By navigating to the Advanced Watering Times page, it includes instructions on how to perform the test and a step-by-step guide to determine your precipitation rates. Once we know our precipitation rate, evapotranspiration, and precipitation numbers, we can begin to program efficiently. So let's talk about controllers. Most controllers have 3 programs. In controller speak, programs are groups of irrigation zones that will water on the same days per week and at the same start times. Well, sort of the same start time. We'll talk about that in a minute. We use programs to separate hydrozones. For example, if we want our grass to water 3 days per week and our shrubs to water 2 days per week, we can put our grass on program A and our shrubs on program B. If there's also a vegetable garden being irrigated by the system, that can go on program C. Sometimes controllers have programs 1, 2, and 3, but it is the same thing. Start times are the time of day which that program will run. All zones within that program will run in sequence. For example, if you have zones 1, 2, and 3 in program A, and each is scheduled to water for 6 minutes starting at 4 a.m., zone 1 will start at 4, zone 2 at 4:06, and zone 3 at 4:12. With grass, we use the cycle and soak technique where we water each zone, let it sit for about 45 minutes, then repeat 2 more times. In this scenario, you'd have 3 start times at 4, 5, and 6 a.m. The runtime is the amount of time each zone will run. In the above example, the runtime is 6 minutes. As discussed before, runtimes need to change for sprinkler types with different precipitation rates. If a spray nozzle is 6 minutes, a rotator might be 18 minutes, but we don't know for sure until we do our catch can test. The last 2 controller functions are pretty simple. Days per week is just that, the days per week you want to water. This is set at the program level. Remember that in Aurora, watering is allowed no more than 3 days per week. During much of the growing season, 1 or 2 days is plenty, but 3 is needed when it's very hot and dry. On most controllers, you can even set an interval, like water every 3rd day. This is a great option for equal spacing of watering days. Seasonal adjust is something I typically recommend not touching. The purpose is to make minor adjustments to your controller. For example, say you have a program for the hottest and driest time of the summer, but the weather forecast shows a cooling trend for a week. You could set the seasonal adjust to 80% and it will cut your runtimes to 80% of the program minutes. This is a good use of the feature. What you should never do is program your controller for the hottest and driest part of the year, and then use the seasonal adjust every month. If you did this and set it to something like 10% for April, you'd still be watering 3 days per week, 3 times per day, but just barely getting the soil wet. This is not what the plants want. So why do we need to know all of this stuff just to water our landscape? If the plants look good, we must be giving it just what it needs, right? Well, the truth is that is what is happening under the plants is what is important. We're trying to keep the roots happy so that they can feed the plants. We want to think of our soil as a bucket. If we keep the bucket full of water by watering every day, the soil won't be able to take in oxygen. If we let the bucket run completely dry, the roots will dry and the plant will wilt and possibly die. What we want to do is let the bucket get about half empty and then fill it back up again. We call this the soil moisture bucket method of programming irrigation controllers. There's one more piece of the puzzle. Before we can program times to irrigate to replace water loss by evapotranspiration, we need to understand infiltration rate of our soil. This will ensure we don't program run times that will cause runoff. Remember the difference in precipitation rates for the different sprinkler types? Well, the infiltration rate, or how fast the soil absorbs water in, varies by soil types too. The combination of precipitation rate and infiltration rate tells us how long we can water in a single cycle before we need to let it soak. Aurora soils typically fall into the category of clay loam with an infiltration rate of about 0.2 inches per hour. This is just a generalization as your soil may be different. So if we have an infiltration rate of 0.2 inches per hour and a precipitation rate of 1.8 inches an hour, you'd have a maximum runtime of 6 to 7 minutes before you'd start to see runoff. You can also run your system to see when runoff occurs, but it isn't always easy to tell runoff versus backspray, a slightly leaking sprinkler head seal, or some other water that may be slightly running off. All right, it's time to take everything you've learned and create your first efficient schedule. We're going to build a schedule using the previous week as the reference period so that our program replaces the water loss from last week. Here's what we know. There is 1.5 inches of water loss to evapotranspiration. We received 0.5 inches of rainfall, which leaves us a deficit, or the amount we need to replace, of 1 inch. Our precipitation rate is 1.8 inches per hour. To figure out our total minutes to replace the 1 inch of water, we first need to divide our amount to be irrigated, 1 inch, by the precipitation rate, 1.8 inches. This tells us that it will take 0.55 hours at 1.8 inches per hour to give the landscape 1 inch of water. But we don't program in hours, we program in minutes. So we need to multiply 0.55 by 60, which gives us 34 minutes. So we know that we need to water for 34 minutes this week. Let's say the schedule's for early June and we're still watering 2 days per week. Dividing 34 by 2 gives us 17 minutes per day. Based on our soil type and a field test, we've determined that our precipitation rate will start getting runoff at 7 minutes. So we'll limit our run times to 6 minutes each. 6 minutes times 3 start times is 18 minutes, which is very close to the 17 minutes we need. Our final schedule is 2 days per week, 3 cycles of 6-minute run times spaced an hour apart. And that's it. You've just created your first efficient schedule. Let's look at another example for building a schedule. We'll utilize the same weather data of 1.5 inches of ET, 0.5 inches of rainfall, and a deficit of 1 inch of water. Instead of spray nozzle with a precipitation rate of 1.5 inches per hour, let's see what happens when we have rotary nozzles with a precipitation rate of 0.4 inches per hour. Rotary nozzles vary from 0.4 to 0.8 or so, depending on the brand and head layout. Using our formula of water deficit divided by precipitation rate, we have to irrigate 2.5 hours for the week to replace the deficit. When we multiply by 60, we have 150 minutes. If you remember from the previous example, we only had 34 minutes. This spotlights the importance of understanding your precipitation rate. Still using cycle and soak, we can break the 150 minutes into our 2 watering days of 75 minutes each. Since we have a much slower precipitation rate, we can run the zones much longer before we get runoff. In this case, we'll use 28 minutes as the maximum runtime before runoff. But instead of trying to schedule 3 different runtime lengths, we can keep things simple and round down to 25. Our final schedule would be 2 days per week, 3 cycles per day of 25 minutes each. The start times may need to spread out a bit depending on the number of zones, since it will now take longer to get through all of the zones. You now have everything you need, right? Well, how about the weather data? No, you don't need to go buy a fancy weather station. We'll actually send you a weekly email with the inches of water needed for your part of town when you sign up for our Know Your Flow program. You'll also get a monthly email that shows your actual water use versus recommended water use. It's a great free tool to help you continue on your path for efficiency, both indoors and out. Sign up is easy. Just Google Aurora Water Know Your Flow, visit auroragov.org, or give us a call at 303 739 7195. You are now equipped to be an efficient irrigation scheduler. But what about those fancy smart controllers you keep seeing ads for? Smart controllers use weather data to help build a program for you. They also will modify your system based on the newest available weather information. So, why then do you need to know all the stuff you just learned? That base information is key to understanding what a smart controller is doing. And if you choose to use one, it helps you understand the required inputs and how to manage it. At the end of the day, you are still in control. During setup, you'll be required to put in some basic things like type of plants, slope, maybe soil type and sun exposure. But with your new knowledge, you can dive deeper into the advanced settings. Here, you will be able to input more precise information specific to your system, like precipitation rate and distribution uniformity. This allows the controller to build a specific program just for your system. But once up and running, you still can't just set it and forget it. A season of monitoring what is going on and making small tweaks here and there will ensure your controller is dialed in. Most smart controllers operate through a mobile app, giving you access to your controller right from your phone. This makes programming simple. It also gives you the ability to run your zones manually right from your phone, so it's easier to do checkups on your heads, spray patterns, and the rest of your components. Even better, Aurora Water offers rebates on smart controllers. We'll pay up to $200 for the cost of replacing your standard controller with a smart controller. Just remember, you're still in charge and need to manage it. If you go the smart controller route, there are a few other add-ons available. Rain sensors are required, even with a smart controller, and they detect rain at your specific site. While the smart controllers do a good job, they are using forecasts and historic data. Without a rain sensor, they don't know exactly when it is raining on your landscape. Soil moisture sensors are another smart feature that measure the moisture level in your soil. There are different types that affect your system differently. If you have questions specific to soil moisture sensors, give us a call to discuss. Flow sensors measure the flow going through your irrigation main line. This can be used for calculating the gross precipitation rate, but even better, it can alert you of leaks or problems within your system. Aurora Water also offers rebates on in-ground irrigation components to help you build a fully efficient system. Check aurorawater.org/rebates for all of our rebate information. And just one more reminder, don't forget to sign up for Know Your Flow at auroragov.org or by calling 303 739 7195. Please visit our website for more information at www.auroragov.org, by emailing conservation@auroragov.org, or by calling our hotline at 303 739 7195. Thank you.